So hello, I'm Frederick Dunn, and today we're going to be doing a detailed review of a bee vacuum, something you use when you find a swarm in an area where you can't just shake them out of the tree, or get them off of your house or under the porch or something like that. And I'm going to be testing out what's called the Colorado Bee Vac, which I purchased for full price from BetterBee.com. Even though this thing was invented by a guy named Guy Shingleton, I just decided that it looked like the kind of vac I'd like to evaluate. Been sitting in the garage for months in a box, and wouldn't you know it, on this maple tree, I've got a late season swarm, and it's a good sized swarm, so I don't want to waste it. And I thought, why not take this time now to make a review of this bee vac? But I'll also talk to you about considerations that would apply to any bee vac you might want to use, and I think it's going to be helpful. So obviously this swarm of bees, with the queen in there somewhere, they're bivouacked on this tree, but they collected around the central column of the tree. So you couldn't just cut them down. I'm going to use this Colorado Bee Vac. It says it's manufactured and distributed by BetterBee now, though originally the guy was selling these himself, I believe, through Etsy or eBay and stuff like that. But first we're going to go over the components of it just to show you what comes along with it. So that's the vac motor itself. It's a regular shop vac motor that's been attached to this backer board. And look at this. That's regular pegboard that you find in hardware stores. I also have this on the walls in my garage. And then there's a piece of weather stripping in there. And they don't want you to leave it on the collection box because that weather stripping could actually stick to it. This is a 1-inch threaded globe valve. And that's how you control the suction power through the hose, because this is a bypass. So the more you close this off like that, that would be 100% closed off. That means 100% of the suction of the vac goes through the hose. If you have it wide open like this, it greatly reduces the amount of suction through the hose, and therefore the amount of air velocity that your honeybees are exposed to. That's the exhaust port off the back. Pretty simple design, really. And then they give you this rigid intake attachment, which I'm not super excited about, and I'm going to explain more about that to you and why it's kind of a problem later on. Now this is the hardware cloth that's on it. This looks like a regular 10-frame bee box. They put this 1/8-inch opening hardware cloth that looks like it's galvanized steel, and then they have a regular slider intake controller here where you're going to attach the hose wide open. And it looked at first when I saw the edge there that the bees might bump into that, but no, the intake hose is actually a smaller diameter, 1.5 inches, so the bees don't interact with that little slide there. Then they have this cool pull-out sheet on the bottom that's held in by that barrel bolt. Nice heavy galvanized steel plate, pretty decent. And they cut these grooves, first of all, so you can slide it in, and then those grooves are all around the interior surface so that that cookie sheet slides in there and is hidden around the edges so the bees don't get through it. Also looks like they did a little 3/4 by 3/4 inch wooden shim there to hold the hardware cloth in place, and there you see the intake tube just drilled through the side of the box and then mounted with those 4 screws on the outside. So I like the way it's built. This thing cost me a little over $300, by the way. So it's a little pricey, but then when I was thinking, if I bought all these components together and then built it myself, how much of my time is that going to take? And I might mess it up a little bit, who knows, but it's actually worth the money to me, and I'm going to show you why. The other thing is, when you put the top on and that weather stripping is in there, that's it. It just seats on there, no clips, no retainers, no straps. It just sits on there, and of course when it's on, the vacuum sucks it down onto the surface. Now this is the intake hose. That reducer that's on there goes from 1.5 inches to 2 inches. It's a regular plumbing rubber reducer. Might be silicone, not sure. And then of course you've got that screw clamp on there, and you do not need a clamp where it attaches to the vac intake. And here's that hose. And one thing I really like about this, smooth interior surface. You can get these hoses from Home Depot, probably Lowe's, other building centers. And a 10-foot hose comes with it. But the guy that invented it says that you could get one as long as 30 feet. So, and they're not cheap, by the way. Price those out at Home Depot. You're going to pay over $90 for a 25 to 30-foot intake hose. But it's rigid and it won't collapse when the vacuum's running. So now let's go out and deal with our swarm that's on the tree. But first I have to get power out there. This is a 75-foot cord, and it's on this reel, so that's going to be part of my kit whenever I go to use this vac system. And I've got that intake bypass port at almost full bore, so I should have a really soft intake there. Now we're going to open that, don't forget, otherwise the air is not going to pass through and your bees aren't going to go through the tube. And that's a threaded piece, so you can rig this yourself. All this stuff is available in the plumbing section at your favorite building center, I'm sure. The other thing is, make sure your intake hose is as straight as possible with no bends and curves, because that gives your bees a rougher ride as they go through the tube. Here we are. They're all settled, so I'm going to get my ladder here, get up there and start vacuuming them off, and we'll see how well it works. Now this took a long time. If I had a battery system, which I tried, I used a DeWalt large battery portable vacuum system, tried to make my own Bee Vac, and those batteries just don't last long enough for me to do what I need to do, and the vacuum that comes with the battery powered kits just isn't strong enough, to be honest. So if you're going to make one, you're going to want to use a full power unit, maybe use an inverter if you're going to use batteries, run it off another piece of equipment, or bring a generator with you, which would be even better, and keep that well away from your swarm source, because we don't want to put a bunch of carbon monoxide out there, not to mention the noise and vibration that comes with a generator. So being able to plug it into a power source is the best. Then you can take your time, and remember this is going to be low suction, so I started at the bottom just to see how strong it would be, and we've got bees on the surface there doing the waggle dance, so that means the scouts are out trying to find a place for them to live. But being that this is the month of August, we need to hive them up, plus this is way too many bees to just let go. So I started at the bottom, very light suction, and remember this is the lightest suction setting of the Colorado Bee Vac. And the bees are going right in. They don't seem too terribly bothered. But I thought going from the bottom up was a good move, but actually it works better if you start higher up and then work your way down across the surface of the bees. So going down like this, start high, draw them off the top. Don't be tempted to just stick your intake tube right in there and get as many bees as you can at once, because, as I mentioned earlier on, the problem with this intake tube is the bees can clog it up. So if you get too many bees at one time, or let's say you suck in a bunch of leaves or something, you can clog it and you won't know, other than that you'll have the loss of suction at the entrance. So I recommend, if you can find one, and if you can, please put the link to it down in my video description. I'd like to find a clear attachment for this part of the vacuum hose, so I can see if anything's plugging up, if there's a bunch of bees jammed in there, and then I can deal with that before I continue. But it took a lot of time to do this. It's no rush, and if I could spot the queen, I also have a queen cage handy with me just in case. But then I second thought that if I find the queen, I really want to run her through the system, because part of the evaluation of this suction system would be, does it damage the bees? Would it hurt the queen? Well, that pegboard surface on the interior of the capture system spreads out the discharge, so spreads out the vacuum once you get inside. Of course, I sped this up. Don't want you to sit and stare at this all the time, but because they have it spread out through the pegboard system on that interior surface, there's no focal point of suction once they get inside that box where the bees could be jammed up against it, number one, to reduce the effectiveness of the suction, or number two, to cause injury to the bees that are stuck right up against that where the discharge is. So you definitely, if you're building something on your own, you want to spread out that interior surface where the discharge is happening. And the intake, I recommend being at a different angle, just like they did here. This is a well thought out system by Guy Shingleton. When the bees come in through the end of the box, if the intake were directly across the box and the exhausts were opposite that, they would fly into the box and slam against that far surface. But instead, because the discharge surface is at the top, the bees are sucked into that space, and then they just collect on the back wall or on the bottom, and a few do get sucked to the top, but it's not to the point where it causes the bees stress, and it's not injuring them. So again, remember, this is working, and this is with that bypass valve. That 1-inch threaded globe valve is wide open. So I have to say I'm pretty happy with that right now. Now there's another risk. While your bees are in your bee vac, this is a nice hot day, we need to leave the vacuum running. Don't turn it off. If you had a battery and your battery ran out, now you've got a bunch of bees in a hot box and no ventilation coming in because the motor's not running. So circulating this air through also keeps your bees alive. And I'll go over that as we close this off too. I want you to see it. The other thing is I'm going to show you 2 different captures in this video. That's why it's so long. I know. 33-minute video about a bee vac? Well, that's right, because there's details that we're going to cover. Plus, we're also going to collect a ground swarm. So I'm going to show you both. I'm also going to show you 2 methods of putting your bees in your final hive. And you're going to find that useful too, because there's definitely a difference here. I did watch the video by the inventor. Guy Shingleton put out his video about the Colorado Bee Vac, and they call it that because he's part of the Colorado Bee Rescue. And in his, he said, when you put the box on your base unit and you pull the cookie sheet out, your bees will leave that upper box and go right into the bottom. Well, it might not happen that way. So, of course, I sped this up to spare you the monotony of seeing every detail of this. But you can take your time, get the bees out of the tree, watch for the queen if you wanted to collect her, or just let her go right into the vacuum. And I'll tell you ahead of time, this does not harm queens. And when we get to the ground swarms, you're going to actually see the queen there, and I'm going to know that she came from one of my hives because she's marked. So once again, if this is somebody else's property, for example, and they called you to get the bees, I like to bring pruning shears and things like that, and I ask permission to cut branches away. But with a bee vac, I don't have to cut off any of the branches, the leaves. I don't have to damage their shrubbery. We could get these from under a soffit, off a fence, at the base of a tree, up against a foundation. All these areas where you have kind of a tough time collecting the bees and then going away clean, of course. So having a bee vac like this one that collects everything into a big catch box, it's the size of a 10 frame deep, then you just close it up, take the vacuum part off, and you've got the screen top so they can breathe, put that right in the back of your car, and drive away. So I actually like this thing a lot. Wish I'd taken it out of the box earlier because I've collected quite a few swarms this year. All my own, of course, and I declined invitations to go and collect swarms elsewhere. Just because I'm trying to stay with my own stock, reduce stress, also keep the genetics that I'm working with here instead of bringing in feral stock from other locations. So we're also still good with Varroa so far this year, but we've done a lot of splits. And we've let bees swarm because out where I live, we have thousands of acres of natural resources for the bees and places for them to go and hive up. But this time of year, if we don't collect them, they're kind of doomed. But there we go. We cleaned that off of the tree pretty good. Now before you shut off the vac, you want to make sure and close off this exit. As soon as that suction stops, the bees could come right out through that reducer. So now it's closed, we turn that off. Next step, we're going to pull the cover off right away so they get plenty of ventilation. It's also going to let us look to see how many bees we've got in there. And you want to put them right in the shade as well. All common sense stuff. And there's the bees. That's the swarm. So there again, just a reminder, they actually sell these capture boxes separate too. So you could have several of those. If you showed up somewhere and there were 2 or 3 different swarms, you just put one in each capture box and go your happy way and continue to use your vac. Again, 110, 120 volt power is going to be really beneficial to you. And here is the 1/8-inch hardware cloth. Listening to all the bees in there fanning away. They don't seem terribly excited or flustered. And I did spray some sugar syrup on here a little later because they were sticking their tongues out and things like that. And we're going to transfer them to a nice deep hive body. And they caution you here that that foam will stick to the top of the wooden box if you leave it stored that way. So put something between it, maybe put some silicone grease on that or something like that to keep it from sticking. So anyway, I quickly set up this hive stand. This is also a metal stand that's adjustable for uneven ground. And I got that also from BetterBee. And then I'm using 2x6 pressure treated lumber that's cut down to 2x4s for the ends. And I'm going to continue my evaluation of these hive gate systems by putting 2 into this bottom board, and that's the metal entrance plate that comes from that company. It's BIQ Solutions. And I'm putting 2 of them in there because of the size of the swarm that I'm about to install. So I thought it would be a great opportunity also to continue my evaluation of this. The jury's still out. I haven't had these through a winter yet. They are good deterrents for bees being robbed. That's why I'm interested now. And I just put little wooden inserts on either end. I'm counting on the bees to propolize those up themselves and seal them in place. So they're just hand set in there for now. And you can see that that steel, galvanized steel plate there is reversible. So if we have to go down to just 1, we can do that. Slatted rack, 10 frame slatted rack. And then you see the intake is right near the middle there. And that's going to help the bees. Another thing that I'm testing this year, again, jury's still out, don't have any final word on it, is the Bee Smart Designs insulated inner cover. The frames that we're putting in here are the Acorn heavy wax frames. That one's already drawn out because it's been extracted. Here's one that's full of honey. Took it off a healthy colony that was too advanced for my taste this time of year, trying to give them space, so I pulled their honey out and decided to use it here with my swarm box. And over here we've got Better Comb. It's also full of capped honey. So we're giving them these resources instead of trying to feed them through that inner cover there, even though there is, if you look at it, there's a black cover that you can pull off in the center of that insulated cover, and you can put a rapid round on there. So we'll push all the frames to the middle so that when we do inspections later, we can pull them off to the side, not risk rolling the queen. Now there's an option here to have a vented top. I am putting this in the non-vented position. So if you look underneath, there's a channel here. So if we had the vented portion, if we wanted the bees to have an entrance up there, we would just run the channel towards the front. But if not, you want to close it off, which is what I'm doing here. We just reverse that insulated insert, which is an R value of 10. So again, that one's by Bee Smart Designs. I'm evaluating that this year going into this winter, and it has little cutouts in it for the robbing screens and things like that, mouse guards and all the other things that Bee Smart makes. And we're going to, of course, pull that off, and we're going to put our catch box on there and see if we can get the bees to go down in below. So that's how we're all set. This is well away from other hives, and it faces a cornfield, but there's a good buffer zone of goldenrod in between us. Lots of bees in here. Great opportunity to evaluate a bee vac. So here they are, and again, this is the same day that we vacuum them off the tree. Now listen how quiet it gets when we put that insulated cover on. Nice. So having an insulated inner cover is going to be a lot of fun going through winter this year. Now we're going to, of course, put a feeder shim on there in the event that I do have to put a rapid round or something on there later on, although we're counting on the frames that I already installed that have capped honey and nectar in them. We have 2 full deep frames in there for that. I think that's going to get them started. We're going to pull the cookie sheet out nice and slow. It's going to let them fall down into that box below. And you can do this without protection, of course, because the bees aren't going to fly out. Everything is self-contained. This is pretty tidy. And then, of course, a barrel bolt there, which holds it in. And you can actually use the handle on this plate to carry the box. So here we are. We're going to see how long it takes for the bees to actually explore these entrances. They do that pretty quickly. And then they started fanning there. And it was interesting because at the very beginning they were fanning into it. I've never seen bees turn their heads outward and fan into an opening before, but they quickly changed that around to head in, and their abdomen was out, and they're fanning, moving air through. And then of course we've got a bunch of the bees here from the swarm doing orientation flights. A lot of fun to see that right away. Now the queen has the option to make an exit if she wanted to. These hive gate entrances are plenty big for queens to get out, but guess what can't get in? Bumblebees can't get in here and rob them. Yellow jackets don't even want to go in there because they'd have to pass through this tunnel, and one of the first group of workers here to line up would be the guard bees. So they're actually taking possession of this hive. Good move on their part. Lucky for me, because now I can evaluate it. And I will tell you, it's been almost a week since I hived this, and I'm making this video, so doing this narration a week later. And they're doing fantastic even today, and the queen is in there, even though I didn't actually see her when I was vacuuming them off of that tree. And again, manufacturer details here, but we're going to pull that box off and see how many bees are in it. So this is now 24 hours later, nice, foggy, balmy August morning. And we're going to look inside to see how many bees are left up in that catch box and how many bees are down in this brood box, which is probably going to be all they're going to need for the year. You can see that it's foggy, the humidity is really high, lots of venting activity going on here on this landing board. Plenty of guards, which is what I like to see. I don't want anybody getting in there and taking advantage of a colony that's in its infant state. Pull off that insulated cover, and unlike what was described in the designer's video, they did not all just go down into that bottom box. They stayed up here at the top. Let's see how many of them are in there. They started building their own comb up there. They put little dabs of beeswax on the interior surface. Notice I'm also not smoking them. This isn't a time to smoke the bees. We're dealing with a recently hived swarm. If you smoke them and harass them a lot, you could actually drive them out. They could abscond. And when they abscond, that means they take off just like they're still in swarm mode and they don't come back. The only thing we have holding them here is the fact that we've got some pre-drawn comb in there, and we've also got some honey and nectar resources. But look at all the bees that were still in the box. So I move it around to the front, put it in direct contact with the landing board, and we have other boxes underneath of it to shim it up to that height. And the bees eventually start clambering over the top of each other and going in. So even if the queen were up in this cluster, it's highly likely that she's going to follow those pheromones herself, and she's going to go right inside. One of the signs that the queen has made her travels into that channel and into the box, or was already there from the night before, would be the workers that are out here with their Nasonov glands sticking high in the air and fanning out the queen's pheromone so that the others know that this is the place to be. And they clambered up over each other's bodies, and they just started marching right inside through the hive gate entrances. They didn't show a preference over the right entrance or the left entrance, and they used them pretty equally. For those of you who are in the Northwest and worried about the Asian giant hornets now, these entrances also prevent the entrance of giant hornets. European hornets don't go in there, so if they're going to hunt bees, they're going to have to do it outside the hive. They're not going to be able to invade hives, which they are known to do, and the yellow jackets have not been getting into these entrances either. So here we are. Of course, we're jump cutting to scenes to show you that they did ultimately all migrate in, and we finished up here, took the box away. So that is the conclusion of the first example of the Colorado Bee Vac, using it to get bees out of the tree. And now we're going to go to another situation where we have bees on the ground. Now this is just a shot across my lower meadow here to show you that goldenrod is still blooming. They have lots of resources. Those are cosmos, and the bees are getting pollen and nectar from those. So this is why we don't really have to feed them yet. And wouldn't you know it, a tiny swarm of bees on the ground. Perfect situation for a swarm collection vacuum system. So now we're going to do this one. And why would they be on the ground like this in the first place? Well, they're grounded because the queen probably couldn't fly. I think she left her colony too soon. Her body was too heavy, and she only flew about 50 feet, 60 feet from the apiary, landed on the ground, and then of course the accompanying bees, the swarm that went with her, also became grounded. And now we're going to keep the suction low, and we're going to rake across the top. But here's where I got into a pickle. With the number of bees going into this intake tube, too many at once, and they ultimately plugged it up on me, which means you lose suction. If you lose suction, that's not good for the bees that are in the collection box, because it means their ventilation has gone down, although they do get air through that globe valve, that 1-inch bypass valve that we have. But when you get plugged up here on your intake tube, you got problems, because the bees actually can walk in and out of it. There's the queen right there, lower right. She's marked. And I did suck her in through the vacuum rather than pick her up because I thought we should be testing its impact on the queen as well. And then you notice the bees just start collecting on the intake tube. So this is why I want... Oh, there goes the queen again, scooting off to the left. There she goes. Just got her right there. Let's see how the suction's reduced because there's so many bees in there. The bees can walk in and out. Not what we want to see. And I'll just give you a close-up here of what happens when a bunch of bees get inside and plug up this intake. They can walk right in and walk right out, so the vacuum is rendered ineffective. If this were clear, I could see where the clog was, which I ultimately did figure out, and I ended up blowing into that intake to dislodge the cluster of bees that were in there, and everything went back to normal. But while it's in its low suction phase here, and the queen's pheromone is on that intake tube, we got all these free riders on it. Then once I cleared it, now it's back to full suction, and even bees that are flying by to inspect things get sucked right out of the air, right into the tube. So those of you who've dealt with swarms before, once you collect them off a space, off a tree, off a, a gate or anything like that, the foraging bees that are out come back to that spot to report their findings, but now instead of finding the cluster of bees and the queen's pheromone, they find an intake tube and it just sucks them right in so they can join their fellow bees from that same cluster. Now, I'm not sure that some of the bees that showed up here weren't from other colonies. They might actually have been foragers, and I'll explain why I think that later. So here we're using an old landing board. This is going to be a 10-frame system, slatted rack again, and we're looking at it from the back side. That solid piece of wood goes towards the entrance. This time again, we're going to put those inserts there that the bees are going to glue up to hold in place on their own. They sit nice and loose. The bees tend to glue that up pretty fast. And we're going to put a hive gate system in this one because it's such a tiny colony. We're only going to use one entrance. And we're going to put screws on it just like that. It's adjustable, reversible. And now we're going to stick that one piece of plastic in there. This comes out of New Zealand, by the way, if you want to read more. BIQ Solutions. And we're just evaluating it, so jury's still out. And you can adjust the interior there. See where the vent comes through, it vents directly under where the cluster of the bees would be. Also, if a wasp or hornet or anything else can get through that entrance, if it's small enough, it passes in there and ends up coming out right under the cluster where it's going to meet guard bees if they're not already out in front, or if it doesn't already meet guard bees in that passage on its way in. We're doing a 10-frame deep box here. Going to load it up again. We've got drawn comb. That's been extracted, the honey's been extracted, and we've got a foundationless frame in there, and we've also got a frame or two of fully capped honey, and these are acorn heavy wax frames. And now this time, this is how I'm going to get them out of that collection box. This is a Ciracell Great Escape plastic escape board. And I like that it's got screens all the way through it, these entrance cones that the bees will go through one way, but then they're drawn to the screens from the underside, which means that they won't be figuring out the cones and getting back through and back up into the upper box that they're coming out of. So we're going to check this thing out too, but use any kind of escape board that you happen to have, and I think you're going to find that this is a good move. So we're going to put this box on here that's got this tiny swarm in it. True underdogs. And we're going to put an insulated cover over the top of that, of course, just showing you the gear that we're bringing to use for this experiment. And again, these inner covers I'll be evaluating through the winter this year. So now we're going to pull the tray out. Let those bees drop down, only this time we have the advantage of an escape board. So once they go down, they shouldn't be able to come back up. But also I noticed on these Ciracell escape boards, there's a gap there. You can see the air blowing through it, just at the top of that black edge there. Also, if you look at the top of this screen, there's an air gap up there. So the bees are also drawn to light and ventilation that's flowing through there. So I figure I got to do something about that. Otherwise, what reason do they have to go down below if they've got plenty of ventilation and the air distracts them? There's a yellow jacket. You have no chance of getting in there. And even the lower right corner there, it's bowed up. So I kind of wish the plastic perimeter here on these Ciracell units was straight and flush and would match up with the wood. So I wrapped a bunch of shipping strapping here and covered up that vent hole and made it darker so the bees would come down and use the main entrance, which is what we want them to do. That's what they did pretty quickly, and of course, good sign, we've got guard bees here. Now we're 24 hours later. Time to pull things apart. Moment of truth, let's see if the bees got out of that capture box. Lots of dew dripping off there. We've had heavy rain, it's wet this year. And look what's in this box. Not one bee. Knew it. So that worked. You look inside here, we got a couple of dead bees in there. Cause unknown, but that's one of the reasons I thought we might have sucked up some scout bees from other colonies. They might have gotten in a conflict with the bees in there. The other thing is there were a couple of dead wasps, and they're dead, so the bees took care of them. But we have no bees in the upper box. So using an escape board underneath your collection box is going to be an excellent tool to use. So whether it's Ciracel or the wooden triangle style, I'm impressed with the Ciracel version. The other thing is you can hose this off, clean it up easily. Dead wasps, dead bees. But I'm impressed with the way that worked. I thought that would be a good idea to help them go right down. And in one fell swoop here, we pull the escape board off and put the insulated inner cover on. And then, of course, we're going to close that up. But on the underside of it, there are bees congregated. So now all we have to do is lean that against the landing board on the front of the hive, and those bees can walk right up and into the hive to join the rest of them. We know we have a queen because we saw her when we vacuumed it in, and she's marked white, so she's a queen this year. She's not even a year old. And we'll just put some bricks on here to keep that insulated cover on top of the insulated cover, so double insulation there. And this shows the underside, the bees that went with it, and they will just find their way up across the top over the landing board and into that reduced entrance. By the way, we're doing temperature evaluations of the hives that have these entrance reducers, these hive gates. And we're going to see if bees have more difficulty keeping the hives cool if they have those on as compared to those with just the standard entrance reducer inserts. So we'll be able to report on that a little bit later, probably next month when all the data is collected. And again, they're just spreading their pheromones so the bees know where to go, climb up over all these surfaces. But my only complaint about this escape board is, of course, that it's irregular. It has little bends and stuff. Even though it has the tabs that stick down to keep it in place over a 10-frame box, it is very shifty. There's tiny gaps in it. I would love to see a version that looks just like this but is made out of wood, so the marrying surfaces are nice and flush. But that's it. They all went in. And of course, right on cue, we get more storms. Everybody's trying to dehydrate their honey here. And don't we just get an inch and a half of rain overnight last night? So what I'm going to show you here is my conclusion. What do you think my decision is about this Bee Vac? I think it works great, but here are the things that I learned. I want an escape board, like the one on the left there. You want to make sure and bring your own power. So 75 foot, 100 foot, whatever you can get. Do that. The shop vac, 1.75 horsepower vac, worked really good. The intake tube, I want to get a clear one. I think 10 feet is okay. That's what it includes with it, but I'd like a 25 or 30 foot. That might be handy. If you're going to use a generator or something, you want that well away from the bees. So I think it's pretty cool. What do you think? This Emerson tool makes this shop vac. Thought you might want that information. Thanks for watching. Let me know what your thoughts are. Have a great day and good luck with making your own or buying a shop vac like this one that's modified to be a Colorado Bee Vac. Thanks for watching.